Welcome. This will be my video on the 2017 movie The Death of Stalin. I'm going to start with a review that's not going to spoil the movie itself. It will discuss some aspects of history that are, without bringing those up, you're not going to really be able to understand anything about this movie, so I will go into those. Then I'll get into what I call the thoughts section, where I spoil everything about the movie, and I guess I might as well say the comic as well. And yes, the movie is rated R, so this video B. I fucking love this movie. I'm going to start by getting something out of the way. This is a video where Donald Trump is going to come up. That is simply something that is in the cards. So I want to make absolutely clear, I do not wish any harm upon Donald or any other Trump or anyone. I make this now because if we're being completely honest with ourselves, there are signs that it is possible that if he does not leave office relatively soon, which I hope is accomplished through the political process, through legal means, there is some chance he will die in office, maybe even soon, of, like, not because anyone, I don't necessarily think that anyone's going to hurt him, but some of his own habits, are taking their toll on him. And maybe this video can help motivate some people to fight harder still to have this process where he is removed legally through process. Because I think there is a very real chance that the White House would descend into the kind of chaos that we see in this movie. And I do feel like if it ends up being the case that he dies in office, I could imagine some MAGA being very angry with me over this video. They might already be, regardless. Which means I've done something right. But given that Charlie Kirk ended up becoming a meme after a number of conservative, people with power tried to basically turn him into Jesus Christ. Yeah, I'm less worried. Besides which, I do not have a job in America, so it's not like I could get fired for quoting the person that is now deemed to be... I'm not going to go on forever about Charlie Kirk. If you'd like to hear more about how ridiculous that whole thing is, my personal favorite videos that cover that were mostly made by The Cavernacle. But I think that is that overall. I think this is a good place to talk about, so I am pretty much going to glaze this thing. This is a movie that I just... So before I get into that, I will acknowledge, and also in part to get it out of the way quickly, essentially, I can see one thing about this movie that I can appreciate is arguably a negative. Other than that, it's just, it's not for everyone. That's not a negative. I think we need more that's not for everyone. But the one thing is that while it is not a negative in and of itself, that this movie does require some background knowledge of the Soviet Union in order for you to really keep up. Otherwise, there's just too much. I'm fortunate enough. My father knows a lot about the Soviet Union. He grew up in the years after World War II ended, so he's spent his life trying to understand, both Nazi Germany and Soviet Union, and also, he remembers the Soviet Union. He remembers before it fell. I do not. But the yeah, that in and of itself, to find information about the Soviet Union. You know, it was an artistic choice. It's not that they didn't do their homework. This is very much a movie where they knew their stuff. But there are some inaccuracies that mean that if you do know a lot, then you might be sitting there going, well, that's not how things were in the Soviet Union in 1953. So that's perhaps an argument could be made that that is a problem. Personally, having read the things that would have been different, I think they made the right choice. And I definitely think it was good that they don't feel the need to bog this down with like endless, bringing us up to speed. I watch a lot of MCU and I love most of it. This would be terrible if they tried to have those, expository dialogue that's like, well, in case you didn't watch or don't remember last time we saw this character, here's the lowdown. If we had that for all the, because this is an ensemble cast. There's a lot of major characters in this. And yeah, like if you only watch this, you're not going to get the full like impact of, it assumes that the basics. It is not enough to know that Joseph Stalin was leader. You kind of need to know at least a little bit about every member of the Central Committee. And that is something I'll, frankly, if not for my father telling me, I would not know. A lot of them I wouldn't even know their names, let alone jobs and personalities and such. So, full disclosure, I am not Eastern European. I do know some who are. The following shouldn't have to be said, but they're some of the best people I know. While I personally enjoy this movie a lot, if you're offended by it, especially if you're Eastern European or you know and care about them, that is valid. I do want to make clear, I don't in general think that Stalin and the Soviet Union are things we should just joke about. As mentioned, my father grew up in the years after. In Denmark, he spent his entire life researching. Hitler told me about the evils of Stalin and the Soviet Union since I was old enough to understand words. Right, and I do also want to make clear, before somebody puts it in the comments, yes, I'm very far left. I make no excuses for the Soviet Union. And frankly, a lot of the most compelling criticisms I've heard of the Soviet Union have come from far leftists. We are, a lot of the time, I'm not saying exclusively, much more willing to call out our own than a lot of the far right. But to return to, something else my father taught me is that sometimes we use comedy to process the terrible things of history. Sometimes we laugh at evil to make it as unappealing to potential new recruits as possible. I would not be laughing at this movie if it seemed to be minimizing how awful it was, or if I for a single second got the sense that it was supposed to make Stalin and the Soviet Union look even remotely like they were like somewhat good. And this is also a decent time to say, the problem with the Soviet Union was not communism, it was that it was a dictatorship. If you have a capitalist dictatorship, that's not fundamentally better, and I think that is something that ICE and Trump are making abundantly clear these days. Like, at this point, there is extremely little that Hitler did that Trump hasn't at least attempted. I think really at this point, pretty much just, I guess we'll see. We might see about the eventual fate of the brown shirt, at least leadership, and gas chambers. But does he need to make gas chambers? Like, he's already, like, you don't have to take my word for it. Others have documented Donald Trump. And again, I'm not saying this to, I don't want anyone to do anything to him. I'm not calling for any violence. I'm not far right. But it is a proven fact that his incompetence and unwillingness to do his job properly has led to a lot of deaths. I don't want anything bad to happen to Donald Trump. I want him to be safely removed from office and live for as long as he can, knowing that he failed, knowing that his father will never come back and love him, no matter how many people he hurts. Let's see. So the obviously with a movie like this, it brings up whether or not it is right to laugh at Stalin, not because he doesn't deserve it. There honestly isn't anything so bad that Stalin doesn't deserve it. No, the argument would be that it is disrespectful to all the people he had tortured and murdered because he wanted to work out his frustrations. And I 100% understand that argument. If that is how you personally feel, you're not wrong. That's a matter of opinion. I do want to make it clear, I did not come to this conclusion lightly. I don't laugh at Stalin without spending a lot of time thinking about whether it is, in my opinion, disrespectful to the dead. As mentioned, this is going to be a positive review. If that is not something you want to hear, you are entirely entitled to click away from this video. I would hate to upset anyone other than people who still stand fascists, dictators. And let's see. I suppose this is a good place to make it clear. I am aware of Stalin's troubled youth. I understand that Russia felt that they would be easily invaded, that the Tsar was awful to the Eastern European peoples, and I do empathize with the regular people who felt betrayed and who Stalin managed to fool with populism and pseudoscience. I pride myself on feeling empathy for pretty much anyone. Stalin himself makes that extremely difficult. I find it very difficult once someone chooses to take out their frustration on the defenseless, especially to the degree that he did, and it was a choice. There are other people who have or have had power who chose not to do so. Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela. They could very easily have retaliated against people who caused them pain. They knew that wouldn't be constructive. They understood it is not individuals but systems that were the cause of their pain. Stalin gained political power, and rather than try to change the system to ensure that the pain he and others at the time felt was not felt again, he chose to amass power and take it out on people who had nothing to do with it. Innocent men, women, and children. I am going to discuss in this video some issues that don't affect me personally as a cishet white man. I base what I say on what I've heard from members of minority communities, and in the description box there is a link to a Google Doc that features links to the ones I've felt a lot of the ones I felt I've learned the most from, and I recommend that you watch them and listen to them. I discuss issues relating to them in part because there are a number of cishet white men in the world who refuse to listen to members of minorities, and I hate the idea that they are simply never exposed to these ideas. Every so often I'll come across someone on YouTube who acts like the obviously horrible arguments put forth by conservatives in support of their policies, which they could fix. They could just have better policies. But, prominent, I'm not saying every single individual conservative, but prominent conservatives, politicians and media personalities, and I'm especially talking about the ones in America. Those are the ones I know the most about. Yeah, they'll just act like, oh, no one can even counter this. And it's like, there's so many people who can and who do, but you refuse to listen to them. And then you see, these same conservatives will just like make comments that make it clear what you just don't take these people seriously. And there's no good reason. You're the ones who shouldn't be taken seriously. And you wouldn't be if you didn't have power. You just be, someone rambling. Like, before the attention economy, there was such a thing as just, oh, that person isn't making any sense. No one listens to them, and they maybe get, psychiatric help, but then a bunch of conservatives shut down psychiatric care, made it prohibitively expensive, and now a bunch of people who need help are being treated as if their ideas make sense, and it's getting people killed. RFK Jr. is not qualified for the position. Anyway, so given the title, it is not a spoiler to discuss the indeed titular Death of Stalin. I'm not going to go into that many details because I do think you should see that for yourself. And before I get to the spoiler section, but there is something that I need to say about this film. One of the hilarious things is, if Stalin had just lived a healthy life, he could have lived much longer. But no, he smoked like a chimney, drank like a fish. Let's see, yeah, and it's possible he was not, directly told early on that these were going to shorten his lifespan. I could imagine that many wouldn't have dared to. When he collapses, the reason that they couldn't use the best doctors, and, who knows, it's not impossible that would have meant that he would have ended up living at least a little longer, but his usual doctor had been tortured for recommending more bed rest, which could have saved him, or prolonged his life at least. He had no one to blame but himself. The paranoia that he felt would, prevent his death is exactly what caused it. Not one of the assassins that he seemed to believe, so many of the people currently working for him secretly were hiring. The last person that Joseph Stalin killed with his terrible policies was himself. Poetic justice at its finest. And the guy who was actually supposed to take the position after he died was weak of character, hence some of the rest of the Central Committee being unhappy with that choice. But the reason he was chosen was that Stalin felt confident that he wouldn't assassinate him to get the job, and it led to chaos. An example of the absurd and tragic things that happened in the Soviet Union is that one man whose job it was to monitor the border and immediately let those in charge know if a strange object crossed the border, felt like something was off, didn't believe it was an actual attack, did not want to mistakenly lead to a nuclear war, so he looked more into it. It turned out to be balloons. I believe that it was a red balloon and inspired the German song 99 Luftballons, which is a banger, by the way. So this man single-handedly prevented mutually assured destruction. But do you know how he was rewarded? He wasn't. He was punished. because his job description said to move on nuclear war, not to make sure nuclear war wasn't declared over a mistake. There's, of course, also the fact that when Stalin needed a doctor, the best of them had been put in gulags, and I forget if it was all of them, but a number of them had been executed. There were only bad doctors left because Stalin was convinced that they would poison him, I believe was the specific. And I think that's what I will cover of that. Right, to be clear, I am not going to be calling out the various inaccuracies, historical inaccuracies in this video. And some of what I say, I'm referring to the movie. Some of it, I'm referring to the, actual, the reality. And please do not use this video as a 100%, source of actual, I'm not trying to educate people on the Soviet Union. I'm discussing the movie. And let's see. So yeah, I think that more or less gets us to so there's more on that, which is spoilers, and I think that brings us nicely into the this is a movie I have watched at least 4 times by now, and I laugh so hard my side hurts each time. So for those playing the home game, that's 3 times where I already knew every single joke. And it's not that I'm forgetting them in between. They're too memorable for even my sometimes lousy memory. But they're so fucking funny. They're so well delivered. This is one of the funniest movies that I've ever watched. And it is very much, you may need to, what's the word? You may need to do some manual research before watching it, but it's well worth it. And so briefly, I'm not going to give away whether the ending is happy or sad. I will say it is pitch perfect. It was one of the best parts, and just absolutely amazing. So the setup here, it's one of those things where they take a historical situation and there is some exaggeration going on, though there are other things that are downplayed because some of the facts about the Soviet Union are just so horrifying that we wouldn't be able to laugh. And but it is a satire. And it is essentially, I don't think it's random that Michael Palin is in this. Honestly, given when it was made, obviously it's not literally Monty Python, but if all of them had still been alive and had the energy of their youth, I feel like this might well have been made by, that it is not entirely dissimilar from Life of Brian. But when I say that, it is important to note this does not get as fantastical or sci-fi as some of Monty Python's gets. And while I don't necessarily think it's a huge problem, at least not for something like Life of Brian, for example, but it was something that you might notice while watching, perhaps especially something like The Meaning of Life, which I still hold in very high regard. I am considering doing, I already did a video on Life of Brian. Maybe I'll do, I do have a copy of Meaning of Life and Yellowbeard, I think it's called. And that movie that made, I forget what it's called, but they made a movie that was basically just them remaking a bunch of the most popular sketches. I don't currently have access to the Flying Circus, but I don't know. Let me know if you'd like me to do more Monty Python. I watched everything Monty Python that I could. I guess I believe I have watched everything Monty Python, actually, come to think of it. Anyway, but back when I watched it a ton of times back when I was a teenager. I haven't watched Flying Circus in, I don't know, 20 years or something. Anyway, yes, I think that does, it is something you notice in something like The Meaning of Life. Each scene is essentially a sketch, and that's not really the case here. I think that might just about. So yeah, stuff like psychological accuracy and authenticity are very much affected by it being satire, and I don't mean that as a negative, but yeah, there are times in this where those two aspects are not what they would be if this was trying for something else. It's not a documentary, Mom. But in my opinion, they made the exact right choice. You know what? From now on, when I say something that, okay, maybe some people dislike this, please just assume that I think they made the right choice creatively. But yeah, the fact that some of the time it's a little exaggerated how people are behaving. Not so much so that I feel it could easily get, it's not like it's not a Mel Brooks movie, And that's also something to note. If, now that I've mentioned Monty Python, it doesn't go quite that far, as far as a lot of the times they do go. The level of detail is immense. And the tone, I am in awe of how well they nail that aspect, because this is a movie where there are so many tortures, people dragged away for torture and or execution, and executions, and so many that a lot of the time you don't even get a name. Sometimes you don't even see their face before, during, or after something, and it really brings to mind Stalin's own, I believe, quote, "One death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic." And that is, like, they really put, it's never said or written in this movie, but that is very much something that comes to mind watching this, because you have all these characters who either feel or have to act, and some of them that do feel still have to act because maybe their feelings aren't quite intense enough, even if they really are very up there. Seemingly everyone in the Soviet Union is in sorrow over the death of Stalin, and the movie shows us all of these other people who are also dying, and significantly less care is given to them by the characters, but not the film. And it manages to have us thinking that it's tragic that it happened, which obviously it is. But at the same, as mentioned, we find ourselves laughing. I appreciate not everyone will, and you're neither wrong if you do or don't laugh at this movie. But there's that. I'm afraid I don't know the source, but there's another quote about death that is also very much on display in this movie. And it is something along the lines of tragedy plus time equals comedy. If this movie had been made in like 1954, that could have been really, really fucked up. But, so long after, and with, by the time this was made, the Soviet Union was already a thing of the past, having been gone for, what is that, like 26? For some reason, I can never remember the exact year, but something along those lines. And because of how much it gets to the nature of dictatorships, of people who just want power and use it to hurt others, you can apply it to others. Not even only Trump. And I think, just the each time that we see someone tortured or executed or hear mention of it or such, like, well, there was something that Stalin didn't like about them. And the fact that we don't know more details than that really underlines, and because he dies, we don't even, like, at no point in this movie do they talk about, oh, that person, that, for many of them, I mean, we'll never find out for, some of these. Like, maybe there's something written in a document somewhere that, oh, they insulted Stalin or something, but what does that mean? Like, did they not applaud hard enough at one of his speeches? Because he was infamously petty. They didn't matter to him. And the fact that he got so many people tortured and executed for things that should not be, like, I'm against the death penalty in all cases regardless, but like, if you are going to, I feel like, okay, I don't know, a serial killer, a serial rapist, stuff like that, but so the movie really underlines just how little regard was given to these human beings by the regime. There are times where they're literally just background. At one point, characters walk past a stairwell, and without anyone commenting on it, we see someone rolling down the stairwell. Someone who did something that they're now being punished for, and no one even acknowledges it. There's not even like, oh, I guess it's Tuesday. It's every day. It's a day that ends in a Y. And it really underlines just how horrible dictators are. And as an adaptation, I have to admit, I try not to be a purist. I am well within the ability to acknowledge that sometimes changes are made for the best. Sometimes, this was a movie where they actually managed to make it even better than the comic. I was really impressed. I read the comic after, and I can't rule out that maybe I would have at least slightly different opinion if not, but they really, like, there's so many, in part, there's so many things where it's better. Some of it is stuff that just the comic couldn't possibly do. It has, a comic is a series of drawn still panels. There is no movement, only implied. There is no voice, sound design, music, all of that we have to just imagine. And yeah, if you like either the comic or the movie, I recommend the other one as well. And props to the comic and this movie for getting my father to read a comic. I think I might also be able to get him to read Mouse. But other than that, he is not really super fan of comic books. Now, I think that does bring us to the yeah, and this is also not one of those cases where they just took the original work away from the people who made it. The original screenplay for this movie was written by, I believe, the author of the comic. And dialogue is one of the strongest elements of this movie, both writing and delivery. I have made the decision that I'm not going to quote every single line that I love from this movie, because honestly, I would recommend you just watch the movie, because there's not really a single bad line. There are a couple of standouts. I think I will highlight the standouts, especially in the spoiler section, but nonstop, it is just amazing. It very much feels like British comedy that with this healthy mix. Some of it is verbal, so yeah, something. Yeah, before I continue, British comedy, so similar to, I already mentioned Monty Python, add in Blackadder, spaced, and in general, various works by Edgar Wright. But yeah, so a lot of it is verbal. There is some crassness and just these, like, the Brits have this sense of deriving comedy simply from letting people engage with each other in a way. Like, there are times where this has, like, big, broad stuff, but a bunch of it is just, yeah, these people, close to Stalin. I mean, yeah, just the different personalities and how they're all dealing with the same situation in slightly different ways, and the way that none of them really like each other. And Stalin, if I recall correctly, didn't even mind that. He kind of liked that it was somewhat chaotic, which, again, not like Hitler and Trump. Yeah, just like they are constantly, they mock each other, sometimes to each other's face, and, like, yeah, they cannot stand each other, but they just have no choice, and they're constantly vying for before he dies, impressing Stalin, and afterwards trying to find out, because, like, it's not necessarily that they think, oh, I would definitely be the best leader, I would be able to do what Stalin wanted, but this was a regime that routinely killed people that were no longer, sufficiently, like, there's an early scene where one of the Central Committee members accidentally mentions someone and is like, whatever happened to them? And yeah, like, it's someone that Stalin, fell out of Stalin's favor, and now they're dead. And he says afterwards, how the fuck am I supposed to remember who's alive and who's dead? So any of them that aren't in charge after Stalin, or at the very least on very good terms with whoever is, they might be killed. And I think that covers that aspect. So the direction is very self-assured. I'm afraid this is the only movie, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Iannucci. I'd like to watch more of his. Let me know if you have recommendations for specific ones of his. But yeah, he manages to, like, the tone, a lot of it is his doing. And it's this thing of, like, it's essentially a movie where we spend a lot of time watching people trying to figure out what to do next and then carrying those things out. And that could so easily feel really long and slow. Ultimately the movie is like 100 minutes if you don't count the end credits, or maybe less. But even so, there are movies that are drier than this. But between the fantastic script and his direction, we end up with something that in some ways is not dissimilar from the reality. The Central Committee are like schoolboys. They taunt each other and pull little silly pranks. They say things that, like, usually confined to locker rooms. These are people who never emotionally matured, and of course they didn't, because look at the state of of where they grew up, their entire adult lives. And Stalin wanted them that way. He himself was not particularly, you see him laughing at their terrible jokes, and it works so incredibly well. And it applies so perfectly to so many powerful people all over the world. It also reminds me of tech billionaires, the way they'll talk about, the way that Elon Musk will make light of serious subjects and not take seriously, things that, yeah, and just say horrible things, including about his own family members, including his own daughter. And then when, I believe it was Tim Walz, says, that he hopes Musk loses some money, Musk has the gall to cry on TV and call him a jerk, as if he himself has not said significantly worse. Now that I've mentioned Walls, I might as well mention Lee Miller continues to make the very best videos I've seen on the subject of Renee Good and ICE. There are many from the left that are really, really well done, and some from the right that are unintentionally, like, sincere cause for concern. But the cinematography is also really solid, using to great effect the various tools therein. And, at times a take will, last longer. Sometimes it's more interested in quickly moving on and such. And the editing also, this, This is very tight. There's no wasted time or effort here. Everything works. There are so many different places and people. Then a number of them, it goes very fast. Like, you might not get like an establishing shot. They just cut to the inside of something, and when you meet a significant character for the first time, either someone will say their name, or the footage will slow down and their name and title. I suppose maybe it's just for the Central Committee. Their name and title will be on screen for just long enough that you can read it, and then it moves on. They don't have someone spell out, what does this person normally do? How long have they been doing this? These various things. The production value is incredible. Like, it really feels like, if you look at like photographs and such, yeah, it feels like this is, they actually, filmed it in the places that, yeah. And they did get location shooting. Let's see, I believe it was even in the places where it was set, or more or less something like that. And yeah, the set design, locations, costumes, and makeup are all amazing and really tell us a lot about the people. We see where someone works, lives, that sort of thing. And I think that brings us to the music is also fantastic and always fits completely perfectly. The sound design, part of it is that you have these executions and torture and such, so it's very important. It does not show as much of it because that would just be, we wouldn't be able to sit and laugh as we're watching. But and I appreciate also the sound could also be excessive, but through the sound design they're able to imply more. And it's also worth noting, it doesn't really have us laughing at like someone being hurt. We laugh at how meaningless it is and how random and everyday it is. It's banal. The characters are also one of the best aspects here. This manages to get something significant out of each of them, and there's like, as far as major characters go, I think there might be like a dozen total. And again, it's not that long of a movie. And yeah, so the first thing I want to say about the acting is that this does not really have people putting on fake Eastern European accents, which is, I think, in part reflective of the fact that a lot of the performers here are not Eastern European. And I do think I'd rather that they choose people that they feel are exactly right for the role. I honestly do not know how the situation is as far as Eastern European, like, character actors with comedic talent is, and I could absolutely imagine Russians, a lot of them, like, if you choose to appear in this, you might basically be in exile for the rest of your life. Putin loves Stalin, and yeah, wouldn't rule out some Ukrainians. Zelensky might have been too busy at the time, but I think the I think it's an inspired choice that the various characters, some of them have distinct accents, and it's based on what the actual person that they're playing was like, but it's this... I'm thinking of one actor in particular. He puts on an accent that he felt was appropriate because he knows people in real life who have that accent, who have the same kind of attitude as the actual person. And I think it's just... I keep saying that. Yeah, we're going to move on. This has the some of my favorite performances for a very impressive cast that I love in a lot of what I've seen them in. I don't think I've ever seen Michael Palin better, and he was amazing as one of the Pythons as well. Steve Buscemi, I think really only like some of the stuff he's done with Rodriguez and Tarantino tops this, and this is one of the ones where it uses some of his greatest strengths, which is this kind of impotent but very fiery anger and frustration with a situation. Jeffrey Tambor is so fucking good here. Rupert Friend, this performance of his has competition in his Hitman movie. What was it called again? Hitman Agent 47, I think. And also The Boy in the Striped Pajamas. And yeah, I think... So, which is obviously not a movie that I'm saying is necessarily good, but, if you watch his acting in it, like, that's very strong. Yeah, I think that might... I feel like at this point I'm just fucking naming names. The guy who plays the leader of the military is also spectacular. And yeah, they there's this ongoing thing where basically when someone finds out that something has happened to Stalin, especially after he's dead, or if they're talking about him after he's dead, even if they already feel sad, they have to overact that because people are watching, maybe someone's listening, and it never stops being incredibly funny. Just like that felt very Monty Python to me. The way that they get so much out of this one idea that has tremendous potential, and I feel they live up to it. Yeah, the pacing is quite good. It never really slows down as such. It's very tense from the very start, but it also isn't rushing. And I think that might... So this is also... I've talked about some of the mature elements here and how they're handled. This is also a movie where it is in part about misogyny and homophobia. That was a big part of the environment, the social environment at the time, and still is a big part of Russian culture and a lot of Western culture. But it's very careful to ensure that we're not laughing at someone who's being abused. We're laughing at how ridiculous the abuser is, and just, as mentioned, how childish it is. It's very common for these characters to if someone says something that is perhaps not, or is wearing something, or is doing something that is perhaps not the most masculine, then immediately those come out. And, rape was a massive problem in that environment, and this does not show someone being raped. We see people talk about it in a crude, disrespectful manner. We see before, we see after, but we never see someone who is, has been, will be raped in a really visually undignified situation. And that really is a major part of, like, that could have derailed this movie. It would have been impossible to laugh at if every so often, when rape was brought up, if even one of the times we actually saw, yeah. It's honestly really fucked up that there are rape scenes that are made out to be funny at all in any media. And I'm really glad there aren't any here. I don't think there should be in any media. Yeah, I rate this 8 hopeless, paranoid Central Committee members creating chaos in the wake of a death of Stalin out of 10. And we're going to get into the thought section. And I think, let's see, I think a good place to start is the, yeah, so the, there's an early scene in this where Stalin is not quite perished. He appears to be unable to speak and simply points in order to communicate. The only thing his body is still capable of doing, and with what may well be his last breath, and the half-dozen high-ranking individuals present all try desperately to guess what he's trying to convey. Maybe he's trying to indicate who should take over his position? He's pointing at someone in the Central Committee. Oh, now he's pointing at one of the women working for, I think she's working in the kitchen or something. It's definitely not that. Oh, it's got to be the painting. He's saying we saved him. No, he's celebrating the people flourishing under socialism. Maybe he's asking for something to drink. Quick, somebody get him a glass. Make sure it's water, not milk. He hates milk. It reminded me a lot of that bit in The Life of Brian where the titular apparent messiah accidentally drops one of his sandals while fleeing his followers. These faithful immediately try to build religious tenets around this seemingly meaningless act that may not even be done on purpose. And I believe this is intentional since, Palin is here, and let's see. Yeah, I've seen some try to figure out what, he did mean to communicate with the last, with that otherwise futile last gesture. And some saying, it's talking about whether or not we knew what what the actual thing, is, yeah. Honestly, I think focusing on that misses the forest for the trees. What is crucial to both of these sequences is that we are watching all these people grasp at straws, trying desperately to understand that which, if not understood, might suddenly kill them for no readily discernible reason. This shows how they were always leaping back and forth all the time between the extremes of execution and safety from it. It's like maneuvering a minefield. Part of how it conveys this is that it uses many different types of comedy to great effect. You never know exactly what kind of joke you're going to get next. And yeah, the scene in the Politburo is worth the price of admission by itself. And the film captures perfectly just how unpredictable the Soviet Union was, how easily someone who, through their loyalty, thought they were relatively safe can suddenly be victims. We're not talking about a meritocracy. All the best generals and doctors were killed, each of them suspected of conspiracy and treason. If you were personally close to the ruler, you had to constantly do things that he wanted to keep him pleased, and thus not so eager to have others murdered. And for the vast majority of his people, you couldn't even attempt to do that. You could live your life doing your best to live up to his utterly impossible standards, and one day, out of the blue, the NKVD show up, and your family never sees you again. I doubt anyone who didn't experience it can truly understand the extreme level of constant dread these people lived in. There's a bit of this movie where a son is forced to positively identify his father or tell him where he is, something along those lines, and the father and son exchange a look when he walks past, because, like, what else was he gonna... They would have found out some way, and then the son would also have been killed, and then later they're sent back, and now the son is like, well, shit, because now he is, he was probably already mourning his father. And I think, yeah, a huge chunk of the 50 million who died, oh, right, shit. God damn it. I heard someone dispute that number and say that's counting, like, Nazis killed in, yeah, okay, the many, many people who died in their own country. A huge chunk of them was due to their leaders' poor decision-making and through no fault of their own. And yeah, this is a movie that Stalin would hate if he had lived to see it. Similar to, yeah, in some ways this is the producers of the Eastern Bloc, or about the Eastern Bloc, not of. And let's see, yeah, I think that might more or less cover the, yeah, so I think from here on I'm going to try to make it more or less chronological, scene by scene. So let's see, I think the very first thing is the actual, let's go with that, the what's it called, the concert, and immediately we see this, like, it's impossible to live up to, and later we also see, Svetlana is frustrated that, Beria, I think is how you pronounce it, was unable to do the impossible, and said, you said you try. Yeah, but trying isn't doing. But they're so used to Stalin, demanding the impossible and somehow getting his way, even though, but yeah, he calls once the concert is underway, and instead of just saying, I want you to record it and bring it to me, he says, call me back on this number, the number I'm about to give you, in 17 minutes. By which time the concert is over, and now they have to redo it, and they have to get new audience members, and, it's, yeah. But the, it's one of those things where, like, because he could have just called before the concert starts and said, record it and bring the recording to me, He even calls before it's done, but doesn't tell. And the little thing of, he has to, the guy there is, he's like, I'm sorry, I can barely hear you. No, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to insult you, but I I need to be able to hear you because what you're conveying can get me shot if I don't get it right. And it's like, okay, so, and he tries to, okay, is that the number that rhymes with the word this, and the other guy has to, yes, I am writing it down. Get me something to write with. This fucking thing won't write. I am writing it down. I am not looking for something to write with because I'm terrified that if I tell you that I'm not already writing it down, you're going to have me tortured. And then, there's applause because he's right next to, so that's loud, so he has to hide off in the fucking closet so that he can hear what is being said, which again, not have been a problem if Stalin had called before the start of the fucking concert. This was not like a surprise concert. This was something that had been planned. Stalin knew that. That's why he tuned in. And it doesn't occur to him to maybe just ask for a recording before they start. And let's see, that's when I think the very next thing is, yeah, and then there's like, okay, so he has to call in 17 minutes. From when the phone was answered or from when it was hung up? I don't know. Okay, I mean, I think it's like half a minute. Nah, I think it's 1 minute. Are you sure? No. And it's such a spot on the way that right now Trump, every so often he'll communicate something and it will be repeated or sometimes misinterpreted and miscommunicated by some of the people working for him, and then or maybe he'll suddenly change his mind and then they have to pretend like they didn't say the opposite of what they're saying now, and maybe he did as well, and he'll get angry at people who are doing the best they can because they're incapable literally of doing the thing he's asking for. I don't think we should ever forget that he said maybe Mike Pence deserves to be hanged for not complying with an illegal order, not doing something that there isn't even really a basis for legally speaking, But yeah, I think that brings us to the Central Committee talking last time that Stalin is fully alive and conscious for that. And yeah, we have these little things, the tomato in the pocket, and Stalin's fucking loving it. And then later it's like, oh god damn it, there's still tomato in my pocket, the morning after. And the thing about, the story about like, oh, we'd do anything to keep warm. And okay, I think for some of these I'm just going to use the actor's name because I'm struggling to remember all these. But yeah, Tambor's character is like, what was the grenade? I'm going to go out on a limb here and say they're talking about an actual live grenade. That's the kind of environment that this is. They threw grenades at, prisoners. Just, yeah. I don't know. It gave them a laugh, and that helped them keep warm, something like that, And it really works so well that this story, like, it feels like the kind of thing you would hear, like, false bravado, macho, wannabe alpha male, young guys, And to be clear, I'm not saying that being a wannabe alpha male is worse than being an alpha male. I'm not sure I think anybody should be an alpha male. Not the way that it's being defined by people like Andrew Tate right now. Remember, I hope you're sitting down for this. Remember that time when part of being a man, like a masculine man, a real man, an adult, part of that was seen very widely as, well, you protect the women in your life, and then Andrew Tate comes along and says, not only should you not protect them, you know what? I think I'm digressing enough already. You know what he said and done. it's yeah, he should not receive any respect whatsoever. He should reform, redeem himself, and do what he can to fix the damage he's done. And yeah. Anyway, it's yeah, this is the way that well, Mandalorian there. This is the manner in which young guys who are trying to show off talk to each other about, like, for example, women. And yeah, the way they talk about women is also very much like young man trying to like maybe teenage boy even, or like American Psycho characters. These kinds of And let's see, the Buscemi's character mentions, you gotta write everything down. That's how I do it. That's what works. And yeah, the way the room just goes quiet when he brings up that guy that and let's see, the one of them is like, well, it's late, we should go home. And then it's like, no, we should watch a cowboy movie. And they end up sitting there and they're bored out of their fucking skulls. And like one of them can, he's doing very half-hearted riff tracking, MST3 King. He's like saying, yeah, that guy gets shot, falls off the horse. They've seen this fucking thing a million times, but Stalin wants to watch it, so they have to watch it. And yeah, come to think of it, I think this might be before the 17-minute wait, whatever. But the yeah, and they're talking to Molotov, and then he walks off, and Beria says goodbye forever. What? He's on the list. He was talking to Stalin minutes ago, and Stalin didn't say anything, but now he's going to be disappeared. And that's how it actually was. Like, it just, yeah. And yeah, so the we have the guy practicing, and it's like, why am I bowing? He's not gonna be able to see that. Oh shit, it's 17 minutes. I better dials. Hello, Comrade Stalin, General Secretary. And he's like, well, record it. I'll have someone pick up the recording. And now they have to not run, but get all the they have to make sure as many people stay as possible, and some of them have already left. Some of the audience members, and Olga Kurilenko, who I really appreciate. Like, before this, I had only really seen her in roles that and heard about her appearing in roles where she's very sexualized, and I really appreciate, like, this shows there's no, like, some of the characters will talk about her in a sexual way in this, but she's not sexualized, and it's just, yeah, she's she's a human being. She has a very strong will, and yeah, she knows, like, who the fuck else is he gonna take out? Like, okay, so he takes me out too. He's taking out all of my family, all my friends. He doesn't have power over my thoughts. And the little thing of the she says she refuses, and instead of them having a conversation there, she's being dragged away, and then they have a conversation, because, like, obviously he's going to discuss it away from the rest of them because he doesn't want this to spread. And so he transpires why she doesn't want to. And then there's the thing about well, I mean, we need her. Even Stalin would be able to hear the difference. Even Stalin? Are you saying he has bad ears? No, I mean, Stalin has a good ear. He has two. He has the strongest two ears in the entire Soviet Union. And I'm so sorry if anybody's listening. He's amazing. I love him. He's the first thing I think about in the morning and the last thing I think about at night. Oh my god, and he faints, and then he hits his head on the fucking bucket, and the guy's like, who put that there? Because he has to be angry at something, and he can't say, fucking Stalin, look what he's fucking doing to us. We're his people, we love him, we do all these things for him. this is what he does to us, but that bucket shouldn't be there. And, ends up 20,000 rubles, and they make the record. It's like, should we check if it plays right? We don't have time for that. If, hypothetically, it does not work, you will be chopped into dog meat. And, the little bit where, so he walks up and he's like, I'm sorry for the delay. I had to find a sheet. Your delay has been noted. Because that might get him killed. Even though this whole fucking situation was Stalin's own fault. And then she walks up and says, I would like to tell Stalin how I feel about him. And, the look on the guy's face, like, Jesus. And yeah, she managed to sneak the paper in there, and the guy's trying to take the record back so he can remove the paper. Just, yeah. And the guy's like, I'm not the one that's going to get shot over this. I didn't put the paper in there. So he just walks away, just, yeah. And as soon as Stalin gets it, he's, of course, angry. Instead of just thinking, maybe I fucked up. Maybe I am a terrible leader that, smart, qualified people under me are struggling to live up to my demands. Again, maybe something Trump could learn from. I also want to make sure to get this video out before the midterms. That's presuming Trump doesn't just cancel the midterms. But which I just want to point out, that is something we on the far left noted a while back. He might do that, and, people were saying, oh, that's ridiculous. Now he's openly talking about it. But let's see. Yeah, and we have the thing about the, so he puts that record on. He wants to dance with his baby, and immediately there's a little bit of record skipping, and it's like, oh God. And yeah, he reads the paper, has a good laugh, and collapses. And the guards outside hear it, but they're more scared of opening the door and he's maybe fine than they are of not checking to see if he's fine. Once again, like, people had their lives ruined, even ended, over less than that. And if that's another thing, he could have lived longer if they had immediately opened the door and found him like that, called the best doctor they could find, because it is very critical when that kind of situation happens, But yeah, and the little thing, one of them turns his head and is like, maybe we should check on him? And the other one just looks straight ahead. Maybe you should keep your fucking mouth shut. Because it's both of their asses. Like, he can't say, listen, dude, if you want to open that door and go in and check and get yourself shot, listen, it's not my funeral. Because it is. He would be shot too. Stalin would be like, why didn't you stop him? And yeah, the next morning, the morning drink is brought in, and the circus arrives in town. Everyone has to, like, overperform, oh, what can we do? Just, yeah. And also, Beria handing out the lists and going like, okay, so this guy, shoot him in front of his wife. This guy, shoot him, then dump him in this place. His tone sounds like he's ordering a fucking pizza. Like, okay, so for the office party, please remember, Ken really doesn't like pineapple on pizza. I know Joe wants those. Just make sure that Ken doesn't accidentally open the wrong one, because he's going to be really annoyed. Just like the most casual thing in the fucking world. Beria has done this so many fucking times, and if not for his death, he would have gone on to do, well, I suppose it's possible he would have, but if not for Stalin's death, he would have kept doing that for, yeah. And I think the next thing is Beria arriving, and, I love the detail that he sits at the table, but then, makes sure to sit on the couch when he hears a knock on the door. Like, he doesn't have to ask who it is. He knows no fucking person in the entire Soviet Union would have the nerve to go up and knock on the fucking door with 2 guards outside if they didn't have any business in there. That has to be a Central Committee member. And yeah, he is already seeing himself as the next Stalin. Wonderful little bit of, subtle, like they don't have him come right out and say, I will be mayor. I mean, Stalin, but the general secretary, but, he sits there, and not long after, he's like whispering, sleep for a long, you just stay there. I'll take charge now. And, before you say, oh, well, that's repetition. We already saw him in the chair. No, that's when the Buscemi character realizes that, just how determined Beria is. But the, let's see. Yeah, and the woman running the kitchen and being like, have you called the doctor? Well, I called the Central Committee, so they'll call a doctor. I am the one who doctors. And yeah, the Buscemi character, we see him saying, okay, so there's that thing, Stalin laughed, there's that other thing, he didn't laugh, and there was one thing, I wasn't entirely fucking sure, and then the morning after, read me my notes, and, he's like, what the fuck is that? And she's like, I wrote down what your drunken ass told me. Don't blame me. And the thing about it, Molotov, THHH, was I stuttering? And it's like, no, it's like, so he's dead. And then he says, well, next time, write, Rich. And, because, yeah, he gets the call, something's happened to Stalin, and it's like, fetch me my pants. No, not you. And he's like, oh, God damn it. I'm trying not to just fucking quote it. Every line's just so good. But the thing about, he doesn't even have time to take off his pajamas. So he's spending, a while just pajamas under his clothes, and everyone calls it out, which also felt very like schoolboy. And yeah, he arrives, and I think he's the first of them. There's several who either do or almost kneel in the piss, and it's just such a wonderful contrast. Felt very Monty Python to have this thing of like, oh no, someone I care about, or at least have to present about, is dead. Oh, there's piss. And the let's see, I think the next thing might be when the let's see. Yeah, so more of the members arrive. Yeah, one of the first is maybe Tambor does come before Buscemi. Yeah, I think so. And immediately Beria, he says it's a test, and it technically is, but he's not just testing, the, he acts like, oh, I was just seeing if you would fall for my obvious trap, but in reality, he's seeing if Tambor would be on board. He's testing loyalty in a slightly different way. If Tambor's character had gone along with it, he would have been like, good. And it's genuinely really funny the way that the various of the others have to fight over his, like both Beria and the, let's go with Coalition, are trying to get Tambor on side, because technically he is now the new general secretary. No one wants him to be. No one thinks he's good at it, but yeah. And I think the yeah, I forget the order, but the rest of the Central Committee come in, And the yeah, we have the thing about like another one almost kneeling in the, and then it's like, well, we need someone else over here on my side kneeling in piss. And they have to carry him over to the bed. And we have the little thing about, he's heavier than I thought I would. Are you saying he's heavy? Are you saying the cheerleader is heavy? No, I mean, it's a compliment. It's like gold. Gold is heavy. And one of the others is like, yeah, you would know. You steal so much of it. They fucking can't stand each other, and I'm so here for it. And the, they end up getting him onto the bed. Along the way, they're shouting at various people who are not supposed to see Stalin in that, and they're just doing their fucking jobs. It's not like they're like ogling for no good reason. They're walking through the hallway so they can do the thing they've been told to do. And all these times where people will act like, well, someone might be listening, so we have to deal with that. And just, yeah, I think that brings us to the, then they finally get a doctor, and there's that thing about like, well, none of the good doctors are left. What are we going to do? Get a bad doctor? Get a bad doctor so he can recover and have you shot for getting him a bad doctor? If he recovers, then the doctor was good. And if he doesn't, he's not going to shoot anyone. He's not going to have anyone shot. And there's the thing about like, okay, there's that one woman, she went above and beyond, she'll know. And then we see this retired doctor who's walking his dog, then running his dog, and no one just fucking tells him. And that's a running theme throughout so much of the movie. Nobody just fucking says, listen, you're not in trouble, okay? You might actually, if you do this right, it could be really good for you. And if you do it right, but someone doesn't like the answer, it could also be bad for you. But just come along, we're not immediately having you shot. And on account of that, yeah, they're terrified. You've got that thing. They put the white coat on him. It's like, we found some old friends of yours. I've never seen any of these people in my life. And finally, he's just told, oh yeah, the Stalin had an accident. We were trying to figure out, we need doctors. He thinks, oh shit, now I'm going to be executed for being a fucking doctor, just like all those other ones were, And let's see, I think that is when Svetlana shows up, and she's great. She's one of the best. I really do appreciate how much like the women in this have a backbone, and that is very true. If you've ever met an Eastern European woman, I'm not saying universally, but a number of them really, yeah. And, it's on account of necessity. They had to, like, I believe it was Ukrainian women made a huge impact during World War II, and Ukrainians are still really impressive fighters, and the so the thing about like, oh, that's that's her, we got to get to her first, we have to, because she's important, she's kin, as soon as Yosef is gone, the other Stalins are going to be, and let's see, I think that's when the so the Buscemi talks to her in alone, and she's like, I just want you to know, I'm going to make sure no harm comes to you or your brother. Why would anyone harm us? I'm not saying anyone would harm you. I'm just saying no harm will come to you. You keep saying that word. I think we both know what it means, and I don't like it. I'm just saying if any should come to you, that I won't let that happen. And then he says it again not very long after, and she's like, I cannot fucking believe you said the word again. And it's again this thing of like, this is not a meritocracy, because like, I'm sorry, sounds kind of good to me. Like, do you really not think anyone is out to harm the kin of Joseph Stalin when he dies? Really? Not one person who has the opportunity would, because they're the Stalin, the Joseph's kids were obviously, you were either going to work with them or they might fuck everything up for you, because their word carries a lot of weight. Just, yeah. And then we have and she's like, why are they, saying like that? Are they a choir? And the doctor, the two of the doctors are like, I don't want to give the bad news because I don't want to be shot. They don't even take care of the dog, poor dog, just running around without an owner out there. And it ends up one of them started to read, and he makes sure to say, we've all come to this conclusion, because he doesn't want to be. So I checked. And, because like hypothetically, if he says, I checked and here's the diagnosis, he's going to get shot possibly on the spot. And they're going to be like, okay, so what do you think? And he's getting out ahead of that and saying, we all think that this is the case, and he can't even finish reading it because he's terrified they're going to get killed over it. They're just doing their job. They didn't do anything wrong here, but they're terrified that these fucking mood swing, of powerful people in a dictatorship is going to ruin, maybe even end their lives. And it ends up with the other one, because she knows she's in the clear. She's helped or she feels confident at least, so she reads the rest of it. And, Beria can barely even contain, like, he's relieved that Stalin is dead, and he's very angry, I am never going to forget this. See, I think if Beria was happy, he would be saying, you are going to be rewarded for this, not I'm not going to forget it. There's ambiguity over there in the box in I'm never going to forget this. So he's choosing those words just in case. So if someone says, did you mean he's, what the fuck are you talking about? Of course I mean it's good, And I think, does that bring us to when he is awake? Wait, no, I think in between. Yeah, I think this is the part where they find Vasily. And just immediately, they don't even make a huge thing out of it, but just almost immediately realize, oh, fuck, he got like these, let's see, there was a thing about there was an ice storm, which meant that all planes were grounded for security reasons. Vasily couldn't wait. So he ordered, and they had to do it, because otherwise, what if he tells Papa? He ordered that they still fly. It crashed, because of course it fucking... There's a reason that, bad weather is not something you want to fuck with in a goddamn plane. And now he's dealing with the second best team, and instead of just admitting that he's the one who fucked up, he even says, the son of Joseph Stalin does not make mistakes. So he's yelling at them for not being as good as the best team, even though he's the reason the best team are dead. And he's like, you know what? You don't coach, I coach. Because he's trying desperately to live up to his father. His father just gives orders. So he gets on the ice and says, play as if I'm not here. I think that's strike one. I'm pretty sure that's bad coachy. He's out there on, like, if he was off, if he was on, he probably shouldn't be on the ice at all. He can shout loud enough that they can hear him anyway, but he's standing right where they're trying to shoot, and then he's like, do better. I'm not a coach. Never have been, never will be. I don't think that's good coaching. I think you're supposed to say something other than just do better. But he's completely out of his depth. He couldn't coach a hockey team. He doesn't even respect, okay, you know what? Maybe sometimes weather is too bad for a fucking plane in the air. And he's now like, it's obvious he would never be good as an actual leader of the Soviet Union, you know. And it's also one of those things, I think you have to be extremely careful when you make jokes about someone who has alcoholism, and I believe in reality he did. You know, you don't want to be like kicking down. Alcoholism is a horrible thing. All addiction should be treated gently, respectfully. You know, we don't want people who are struggling with these things to feel like, oh, everybody's just fucking laughing at me. You know, we want them to get help. I am not sure I'm qualified to say if this does do a good enough job being careful and respectful about it. I definitely think the effort shows. You know, we're not really laughing at people with addiction. We're laughing at this, you know, completely hopeless individual. Like, it's, again, we're laughing because we realize how horrible this is. This is what he does. This, like, throughout this entire film, Stalin ruined so many people, you know, including ones who didn't end up dying early deaths because of him just suddenly getting that idea in his head, you know. And that is something I will acknowledge. You know, obviously Trump does not get as many people, he doesn't give out as many personal, at least, orders of, you know, and no, yeah, overall he has not killed as many people. He has not gotten killed as many people as Stalin. Some people might say that's because he hasn't had as long to do so. We're going to move on. But the, yeah, so suddenly Stalin is awake. And so I already talked about the scene of the pointing, but yeah, it's just, it's so fucking good. And the way that they're all like, oh, thank God you're back. You know, and also the thing about, he's irreplaceable. I guess I have to replace him now. You just said he was irreplaceable. And the, let's see. I think that brings us to the committee meeting, maybe. Let's go with that. So yeah, you know, Beria taking on 3 jobs and then making the Buscemi character take on 2, because it's this thing of like, you know, the funeral will keep him busy, and you know, he knows like the Buscemi character is one of the greatest potential threats to him. You know, several of the others are just so weak-willed and pathetic. Like the Tambor character himself is a completely hopeless case. You know, which, as I already mentioned, that's why he got that position. You know, and that is something Tambor just plays so wonderfully. I don't think I've ever been unhappy seeing him pop up in something where he played someone who just has no fucking clue. What can someone please tell me? You know, just yeah. And yeah, I love the voting of the, you know, so I definitely vote in favor. You? I'm sorry, is anybody disagreeing with the general secretary? You know, and each time, like, sometimes they'll talk for like a couple of minutes and eventually everyone votes. It's like, motion passed unanimously. Just, yeah. Because, like, do you really want to be the cause of disharmony? Like, this could really destroy the entire union. Is that something you want on your fucking conscience? Do you know how many people outside of this room would love to be in your seat? And the, let's see, I think that's around the time when, yeah, so the military leader, I already mentioned, is one of the best. I love the fucking accent, and apparently that was very deliberately chosen, you know. I already mentioned that, but yeah. The little thing, you know, he walks in and he's got the coat on, and then he removes the coat. That's also the best use of slow motion in the entire film. And we see all these fucking medals, like, Jesus Christ, what a fucking peacock. Calm the fuck down. And that is, I'm not even sure that's necessarily exaggerated. That was something that, you know, and they're not the only, let's see, was North Korea also that had like a ridiculous amount of medals on their, you know, because they're just showing off. They're just projecting strength, you know. And let's see, I forget if it's the very first time, but one of the first times, you know, he like, yeah, hits Vasily, and, you know, Svetlana trying, but you know, he's huge and he's got weapons, military might, and all this stuff. So you know, she tries. She tries to stand up to him, and he's just like, well, "That's me told." He doesn't even fucking pretend to have respect because he's like, these fucking brats. Like, why are they even in the building? Joseph is already dead. Can we just get them to fuck off so that the adults can have a conversation? You know, and yeah. Let's see and it's again this thing of like, I mean, it's not that Svetlana or any of the women are like inherently worse, but you have these macho assholes throwing their weight around. You know, he's also one we laugh at a lot because he's also so ridiculous. I already mentioned the medals, you know. And you know, then you have the thing about, well, I mean, he wasn't hit that hard. You said no harm, you know, no harm will come to, there's that word again. Okay, from now on, starting now, okay, let's reset the timers. From now on, nothing bad is going to happen. You know, you're right. I should have interfered. I should have put my jaw in front of his fist. That would have definitely solved things, you know. And I think this is around the time where they're, yeah, so they you know, cut open and remove some brain. And, you know, yeah, Vasily's not a fan of that. And, you know, fires his gun in the air like it's a shooting range, and then, you know, they get the gun away from him, and then he struggles with one of the military people over the gun, and everyone's just standing around. And one of them, like, I think it's Svetlana, who like coughs, and it's just, and it goes on for like a minute of them just standing there struggling, and like no one wants, what's that college humor quote? Everyone wants him to stop, but no one wants to touch him. You know, no one wants to be the guy who laid hands of kin of Stalin, you know. And, you know, on one hand, also, everyone knows he's not going to get the fucking gun. He's not tougher than this military guy. Obviously not, you know. And so, yeah, eventually they go, you know, and someone's like, we got to make sure he doesn't get it. It's another gun. And this is the kind of situation where maybe, I don't know, if this wasn't a dictatorship and he wasn't related to the dying dead dictator, maybe they would just be like, you know what, I'm sorry, if we can't trust him around guns in a military dictatorship, maybe we should have him like confined to a room or something. You know, like, I'm not saying that that's like a wonderful situation, but this is really fucked up, you know. And yeah, and yeah, the you're not even a person, you're a descending testicle. I swear I'm not trying to just repeat quote every single line, but they're so fucking good. And the yeah, not long after, you know, he's running around, he's rambling about these vultures, they're taking my father's brains and sending it to America. I love those two, like, we're just like trying to have a conversation and trying to ignore him, and he's like, no, listen to me, and they're like, kind of don't wanna, you know, that's what their body language is saying. It's just amazing. And the I think that might actually bring us, I feel like there's at least one more thing. Let me think. So there's obviously the funeral itself. Yeah, there's the funeral planning. And yeah, Buscemi just fucking hating it. Like, all this A/B testing and calling Skinny Hitler as like, listen, I don't fucking care. So, you care a lot, don't you? You know, Buscemi's like, who gives a fuck about Christmas, you know? And the let's see, I think that's the part where, yeah, then we also have the, you know, okay, so you don't take a photo before I say so. Okay, go ahead, take one. Okay, I think we should take one more. And then someone walks up and he's like, okay, you're dismissed. I thought you were going to take one more. You know, like, how long, do you remember back then, like, cameras, it took a little bit of preparation, you know, it wasn't just like today, you got one in your pocket, you know, but like, yeah, they had to really put effort in back then. And now he's just dismissing them, even though he's acknowledging they're not done, you know. And the thing about, Mr. Karloff, you know, and I believe it is accurate that they liked Western movies. As far as I know, that's not something that they just added for, like, you know, to appeal to Western audience or something. But yeah, and he's like, you know, never fucking talk to me like that in front of them, you know. You embarrass me in front of them. And he's like, oh, okay, never mind. You stay the fuck away. No, he's okay. Come on. He has no fucking clue. He has no clue what he's gonna do. So he's just trying to throw his weight around because I don't know. That's something Yosef did, I guess. Just yeah. And yeah, there's the talk about like we have to make we have to change things so that and these things are like no more arrests. We're going to release prisoners. No more executions. And you have the thing about the trains and such, and then the Buscemi saying, but I'm in charge of trains. Do you feel in charge? And again, it's such like he just wants what he wants. None of them are even really particularly thinking about it. It's just like, no, Mom said I'm in charge now. You have to listen to me. Just like, yeah. Like a couple of brothers being left, home alone for a little bit, and yeah. I think that brings us to Beria. He's trying to curry favor with. He knows it's not popular with the various Central Committee members, so he brings back Molotova, and it's so great. But she's sitting there, she's just like completely fucked up. She's so exhausted. She's been there for a long, long time, and then he's like, "So, Stalin's dead." "Oh no, he's dead. We can never. How will life go on?" Let me just check my crib notes here. And he's like, "Okay, shh, just so you can come back now," because he was the one who wanted you gone. I didn't want you gone. I wanted an ace up my sleeve, and then, the conversation, Molotov's place, and that's also so great, okay, shit, someone might be listening. Let's flush. And then they say something, oh, shit, we have more to say. It won't flush, because, and he points out, yeah, the cistern has to fill back up with water. Like, what are you talking about? Like, and then, Beria comes in, so, your wife, oh, the traitor, the horrible person, I mean, the evidence against her. No, she was a traitor. Because he's like, Beria's testing me. Beria wants me to say that Stalin sucks. And that's not going to happen, And then she, the evidence, she is a traitor. And the evidence against her was fake. Come on back. She clearly heard it, just like, it's so fucked up. It's so unbelievably fucked up. And for the rest of the movie, they keep bringing her up and keep saying, well, I mean, sure, she was a traitor, now she's released. Just they can't quite settle on just, yeah. And I think that brings us to there's also the bit where they all race to the car, because we have to be out ahead, and and then Beria, ever the tactician, he gets out, he has tact. If you don't need tact, call Gus Petch. And then, off with the hat and his, and then the rest of them are like, well, shit, we got to do it too, because otherwise he's going to tell people, those people, they don't even fucking care that our, general secretary is dead. They're so cold and callous. And as soon as everyone's out there and standing like that, he rushes back into the car and drives. It's like a game of fucking musical chairs. But with possible lethal consequences, it's just, I fucking love this movie. Anyway, and oh great, now we're fucking last. And the funeral itself, with the let's see, we have several things. You have the thing about like, why did Buscemi invite the bishops? I didn't invite the bishop. Did Beria invite the bishops? Just ask him. Did Beria invite the bishop? Did you invite? Yeah, I did. Yeah, he says yes. Why did you invite the bishop? And the thing went, this is ridiculous. Change places. No. We can make it look part of the ceremony. And Tempor doesn't answer. And Buscemi takes that as a silent yes. And so he slowly steps in front of Tempor. And Tempor's like, what the fuck are you doing? And so he has to step back. Amazing. Just fucking amazing. And again, like, they're passing around, not quite passing around notes. I don't know what y'all call it in English, but we do it here in Denmark too. Kids will, say something to the kid next to them and say, pass it on. Pass it on. I think it might be called pass it on. But yeah, they're doing that, even though they're adults and they're talking about, they're in a serious situation, but they're talking about this. Yeah, and also the part where they're carrying the coffin. I guess that's a little later. Whatever. They're carrying the coffin, and one of them's like, "Yes," and it takes his hands off the fucking coffin in front of everyone. Just so wonderfully disrespectful. And for Buscemi's like, Tambor, you gotta get on board with this. No, I'm not on board. Tambor's on board. And then later it's like, oh, that's why everyone's acting like they want to fuck my sister. And the let's see, I think, does that bring us to the yeah, I love the thing about, like, for continuity's sake, we should get the little girl that Stalin was next to in this portrait or photo. So none of these are the little girl. No, I mean, we found someone who looks like. I said get the girl. What's the problem? We're having trouble finding her. Isn't that the fucking point of the NKVD, that we always know where someone is? And then they get her and it's like, I don't know, I mean, she's older. Yeah, that's how time works. Get the ones who look. And also these are, Stalin's doubles. They're gone, they don't need them anymore. And the let's see, the part where a bunch of people are loaded on because they're going to get taken to a gulag, and then the guy who gave the order to take them there is shot right there as they watch. Just like complete chaos, yeah. And the the thing about where Beria puts his hand on Tambor is, and he's like, are you wearing a girdle? Are you wearing a corset? It's a girdle. I have a bad back. This will be a test of your ability, of your discretion. And we will be the corset of the country, because, like, he's still fucking with him, but no one at that table knows that it's directed at Tambor, and that, again, it's such fucking middle school bullying bullshit. It's so typical, just Jesus Christ. And I think that brings us to the part where, so yeah, a bunch of people are, walking around. They only get just a few seconds to pass him, and you gotta keep it moving. There's a lot of people waiting outside. Also, I can't believe I forgot to mention, I love when they get a bunch of people in from the outside, and because acoustics, and one of them's just like sitting there eating from because, like, she's fucking hungry, and she was, I'm thinking she was either selling or possibly she bought it and was bringing it home or something, but yeah. And yeah, several of them, there's fucking merchants or something. Like, who the fuck else is outside in a place like this? Because it's like, it's nighttime, it's not like people are walking around, like, yeah. So just and one of the notes, I don't think these people have even heard of Mozart before. And I also loved, we're going to applaud, and then they all start applauding, and he applauds. I said, oh, okay, let's move on, because, I mean, they're not recording yet, you don't need to applaud yet. But they're so fucking scared of Stalin that as soon as he says, we're going to applaud, and also the part where, sit down, you will obey my authority. Because he's trying to be Stalin there, because he's acting on behalf of Stalin, but they're also like, why are we staying? The concert is over. What is this? And the let's see, I think that maybe brings us to the part where Beria has the NKVD take over for the army, because he knows, the guy's in charge of the army, he definitely wants me gone. And and then not terribly long, not many minutes of screen time later, they're like, so let's switch back, change places. And I think that brings us to the part where the let's see. Now, while I try to think of, a couple more lines I love is, I am smiling, but I am fucking furious. Nod as I talk to you. People look to me for assurance, and I have no clue what's going on. And yeah, I think that brings us to the part with the other dog with, there's, what was it? There's hungry ears, so the dog is going to take care of that. So he's, playing with the ball, so the dog will bark. And, they're discussing, and the thing like, well, we need a majority. Well, we need everyone, And yeah, the fucking mess when a bunch of people, they want to see Stalin, because yeah. And then they end up getting, some of them are shot, and it's a complete mess. And it's like, you're the one who got the trains, but, you're the reason why the trains ran on time. And the other one's like, well, it's you who gave the order to shoot, it's just, Jesus Christ. And, because like again, this is a situation that Stalin himself engendered because he wanted people to have a fanatical devotion to him. It was not enough that they do as he says. He wanted to be seen as basically, a god. And I think, as many dictators do, part of how they, something they do to ensure that people obey and don't go against them at all. I think that brings us to when, Buscemi talking to, there was that thing about, Olga's character and, Beria warning her, and then warning Buscemi character, and you have the thing about, oh, so you were, I forget what it's called, but yeah, there's the thing about what he, how she helped him, and there's reference to, they probably had sex. And yeah, and also, that one woman who, she's sitting in the car because she, someone arranged for Beria to have some, or maybe he ordered and he was just surprised that it went so fast, because he seems surprised when she's there. But yeah, and then he's like, okay, so it's time to work. So go into that cell, and then not long after, not many minutes of screen time later, so you're free to go, and it's so random, And yeah, the fact that we don't see her in a sexualized situation, I thought was the exact right choice. Fuck, I already said that. Yeah, I'm trying not to repeat myself. Yes, I think that brings us to, and Buscemi is of course furious with her for that note, and the let's see, I like the detail that Beria made a copy of it. He's not giving the original note away. He wants to have that, so he has something on her and thus on Buscemi, because like somehow that's enough, under these, mock trials where you just need a tiny little bit, because like obviously the fact that the two of them know each other does not mean that he is why that he's okay with what she did, let alone put her up to it or something. Like but it was the last thing that it's why he collapsed. So, and Beria could so easily just immediately have her arrested, but he would rather have something on Buscemi. And even once she's arrested, he doesn't really have anything on Buscemi anymore. And let's see, I think, and you have the thing about how Vasily really wants to give a speech, and there's the thing, there's nothing in the way of me giving a speech. I mean, technically no, but practically yes. And someone points out, I mean, you're barely gonna get a few fucking words out before the planes are flying overhead. It's too late in the planning. We can't just change everything because you decided you're gonna give a fucking speech. And he's just standing there rambling about like we're like cubs. He mentions all the Africans in the Union, and it's like, would you just shut the fuck up, please? I'm begging you, stop. And let's see, I think that brings us to, and the thing about me and my brother are not children. Thank you for listening. You're very good. I am not a child. It's like at this point she can't really say that about her brother anymore. And I think that might be when Buscemi approaches the military, and the thing about like, and then he fought Hitler's bunker and planted the flag. Can we just talk? it was not Hitler's bunker. It was, I forget the name, but one of, Hitler's, one of the people close to him, And then he's like, so I'm going to need you to help against Beria. And I fucking love the thing. This is very serious. I have to report this. Any threat towards any member of the Central Committee. Oh, your fucking face. That's one of the biggest laughs for me. That whole thing. And again, that's such macho bullshit, like he could literally have just immediately said, I agree, because he does hate him, and I don't think Buscemi's character would approach him if he didn't already know that. He's not going to take that chance. But yeah, like the thing is, by approaching him, Buscemi is also painting a target on his own back, because on the military guy's back, because now they're in a conspiracy together. If the military guy agrees to it, he could be taken out to, take care of loose ends. And I think that pretty much gets us to the, let's see. I think, okay, so there's not too terribly much left. Yeah, so we have the, yeah, so the button and the red light are set up, and they hand over their guns, but they of course bring, and yeah, there's the Central Committee meeting, and yeah, Buscemi tells Tambor, you just have to press the button. And then, he doesn't get agreement from him before, and then they start having the meeting, and Beria is like saying, well, that motion has not been officially raised, so we should move on with this other thing. And, Peon tries, with and the, Buscemi ends up just saying, press the button. And Beria, of course, immediately knows what the fuck he's talking about, so he's trying to get away, and then, Buscemi has to, find the button under the table. Just fucking amazing, Right, also good detail that the guns are referred to as, what was it, like, I'll take the tall blonde, they're talking about the guns like they're women, again, this macho, culture. And yeah, he's like banging on the window. They can't hear it outside, and they're turned away, so they can't see it either. And yeah, military coup underway, and Beria trying desperately to appeal to Tambor, and Tambor just looking away because he's so fucking weak. Like he doesn't like Beria either, but he's just And I think that brings us to the right, and oh my god, the thing, during the actual meeting where he says, Stalin himself tore down the status quo and then he rebuilt it. Honey, I know what you're trying to say. I think it would be conveyed more effectively if what you said was he created a new, better status quo. If he just rebuilt the status quo, there would have been no reason to tear it down in the first. And the thing about, he's saying, so we could release prisoners, and some people would say that that's wrong, but I think it's right. So like he's just sitting there A/B testing. He's just trying to figure out, gauging their response, and just like he is beyond spineless. And I think that brings us, and so they have the trial, and it's one of those things where, and also the thing about, he said all of you. Yeah, he means all of us. No, he said all of you. I was over here. He can't have met me. So all of you can kiss my Russian ass. And the coach standing there covering the ears of this poor little girl who's like, I don't want you to hear this. And yeah, Beria, showing the documents, like throwing them on the floor, and then he's like, pick up. Why'd you fucking throw them? You asshole. Like, just, yeah. And yeah, that's part of why he's the first one they get rid of, because he knew so much. He had something on all of them. And then we see they had something on him too. They have also been planning for years for the time when they had to get rid of him. And yeah, him having all this changed nothing. In fact, it might have even made him even more liable to be the first. Yeah. And I think it works so perfectly that the ending of this film is the first of multiple. And we get the little bit of text there at the end. Yeah, the Central Committee basically fell apart there, and that's the environment that Stalin fostered by not getting competent people who got along and were rewarded for when they did the right thing. And let's see. I think that pretty much... But yeah, and also this final trial, yeah, like, he was terrible, obviously, but the movie doesn't, shy away from the fact, the others are as well, It's just, like, yeah. And I think that pretty much covers the entire movie. Yeah. I think it works incredibly well that it starts with something as small as the concert and ends with a military coup and an execution. The first of the, various of the others were also removed, because the concert is a microcosm and of Stalin's regime, and the ending is the aftermath of his death. That is indeed what happened. Again, some of the details might be different, but yeah, it did not outlast him. And hypothetically it could have, and I'm not saying that would have been a good thing unless there had been like tremendous reform. It's obviously better that the Soviet Union fell. So many people are much better off, much happier for that. Maybe Putin should have opened a history book instead of invading. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers. And yeah, the fact that the end credits sees pictures re-edited, faces removed of people who are no longer on good terms with the regime, something that did in fact happen. And to this day, sometimes we'll see dictators and wannabes acting like, oh, I have no idea who that person is. I've never known, and that's more difficult today when there's so many pictures, even videos of the president with a pedophile. And, he used to say, oh, we were friends for years. Good friends. Got along so well. And now it seems like there might finally be consequences. Even as, the regime attempt to delay and distract when it comes to the Epstein files. But yeah, and to think, if Trump had just been okay with what he had, there would have been so much less attention on him in regards to the files. And now that and the extreme actions he's taking to distract, with ICE, with starting wars whilst insisting that he's ending wars, including non-existent, nonsensical ones, this might actually be what gets a large enough chunk of America and, you know, the people who actually hold the power, the politicians and such, to turn on Trump. And he would have been so much less exposed there if he hadn't gone for the presidency multiple times. And obviously would also, you know, it also meant a lot that you have these various, you know, conservative media personalities insisting that, you know, the files should be released, which I do agree with, though they should be. But I think it's noteworthy. I'm not the first person to say this, but they certainly changed their tune when they joined the actual cabinet. It's very noteworthy, if not surprising, the way that they all suddenly decided that what was really wasn't. And it's very clear from the way Trump is acting, truthing, moving or not. He's terrified of the consequences. He can feel that it's, you know, it's getting increasingly close. And to think, he could have made such different choices. He could have made the world a better place with all that money, all that influence, all those people listening to him, hanging on his every word. But he wanted attention more. He even, there was that, you know, bit at a rally where he bemoaned, you know, he noted, well, you know, I'll say I'll help you economically, and you're like, oh, okay. But then I say I hate trans people, and you cheer. And at that exact moment, they did cheer. Were they cheering their own horrible priorities? Or were they even listening to him? Because he didn't say, I hate trans people. He said, you cheer when I say I hate trans people. And they cheered. Because it's all vibes. It has nothing to do with what he can do, wants to do. He just makes people feel like their problems will be solved. Because the feckless Democrats have been terrible at, you know, in part at doing anything, but also in part at underlining the things they did do, because they did make things, in some ways, not all, substantially better compared to Republicans. But so there's Republicans, like, you know, Republican media personalities and politicians just fucking lied about it. They didn't give them any credit. It was completely, yeah. I really do hope that we'll get a far left leader of America. And I know I've said it before. I think there is a chance that Trump is unintentionally inoculating America against more like him, more cult leader reality TV assholes who have no fucking clue what they're doing and never had. He was never any good at anything. He can just talk people into giving him money. That's not actually difficult if you're already rich.